One of the 12 jurors who just convicted Hunter Biden has been speaking to NBC since that historic verdict. Now he's asked to conceal his identity out of fear of possible repercussions. But take a listen to what he's been saying.
Biden did what he did. We didn't do it. We just had to find out whether he purchased a gun illegally or not. And that was the crust of the whole case.
And guilty is the judgment he and 11 other citizens made in a courthouse where Hunter Biden walked past a portrait of his father, the president, hanging on the wall every single day of that case. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. Yet another historic criminal trial with what could be massive political ramifications has now come to a close with yet another guilty verdict. This time, Hunter Biden, President Biden's son, was found guilty of 3 felony counts for lying on a federal gun application, and the jury handed down the verdict this morning after deliberating for a total of 3 hours. Now, these are the charges Hunter Biden has been found guilty on: 2 counts of false statements and 1 count of possession of a firearm by a drug user. The Biden family dealing with the fallout of the verdict tonight, with the president changing plans to arrive in Wilmington earlier this evening, hugging Hunter Biden and his wife right there on the tarmac. President Biden did issue a statement after the verdict saying that him and his first lady will always be there for their son. Meanwhile, Hunter Biden has also issued a statement saying that while he is disappointed by the outcome, he is more grateful for the love and support he got this week. And let's bring in one of our head investigative producers, Sarah Fitzpatrick from Wilmington, who has been following every twist and turn of this case. Sarah, you were in the courtroom. Can you talk to us about the Biden family's reaction as that verdict was read, and what is Hunter Biden saying?
Absolutely. I would say the Biden's family's reaction was very stoic. Everyone kept their faces looking directly at the jury as they heard those words, guilty, guilty, guilty. There were no obvious kind of emotional reactions. Hunter at one point just nodded very slightly. And as the proceedings were done, which happened very quickly, the family embraced Hunter and embraced each other, and then kind of silently walked out into the aisle and out of the courtroom into the defense room, where they had this kind of private meeting with the family and close friends and the legal team. And in that meeting, things got much more emotional. It was more of what has been described to me as kind of Hunter trying to raise everyone's spirits, thanking everyone for their support, for their encouragement, for the defense that he had. And it was primarily a kind of positive and upbeat sort of meeting, even though there were tears in the room. But I'm told that his voice did crack by multiple sources who said that what really got him emotional was talking about the love and the support of his mother and his father and his wife, all of whom he really credits for getting him to this place and honestly keeping him still alive and having this amazing, beautiful life that he describes that wasn't possible prior when he was in the depths of his addiction. So I think, we saw this first family be stoic kind of throughout the public the public-facing nature of being in the courtroom, but behind closed doors, it's been a very, very emotional week. Gadi?
This is a difficult question, but does he seem defiant or like he's taking responsibility? It seems like an appeal is coming. I mean, any idea on what an appeal could look like, what kind of grounds we're talking about, and what do we know about sentencing right now?
Look, I think you've seen in the statements that they respect the jury's opinion, but we also know that they are planning to appeal, and that in fact some of the specific steps that his defense attorneys took in this case, things that sometimes when we were in the courtroom, it wasn't quite clear why they were harping so much on a particular point or trying to establish a particular fact, that was done because they knew or they anticipated that they may need to appeal at some point. I think that the main factors that we would see in an appeal, and we've seen these in statements that the attorneys have made in court or motions that they put before the court, have to do on a couple different things. One would be what they believe to be the unconstitutionality of the gun charge specifically, that there would be any kind of form that would prevent an American citizen from purchasing a gun, and that this question, as it's worded in that gun, could have been could be problematic. And there is a case in front of the Supreme Court right now which could have bearing potentially on this case. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But the other kind of major area of appeal that I would see is which evidence was allowed to be put in front of the jury. For example, we know, and it was discussed, in court filings and in open court, but not in front of the jury, the fact that there are actually two versions of that form that Hunter Biden filled out. There was the version that was sent immediately after, and then there was a later version, which includes some additional documentation that is not on that prior form. The mention of the fact that there is a second form was not explicitly presented to the jury. However, the defense did try and nod to it in certain questions. For example, one witness testified that something was missing from the form that definitely was on it. But it's unclear if the jury would have really picked up that there was this major discrepancy. So that's an area that I think the defense will try and lean hard on. And then I think today we heard from jurors, our own Ryan Nobles spoke to one of those jurors, and they talked about the fact that the jurors had been kind of deadlocked and that there was a split and that there were certain things that they were taking into consideration. I expect that those statements will be part of any appeal that gets submitted. So we're going to have to wait and see, but I think there's some pretty clear indications of what that appeal will look like. Gadi?
Yeah, 3 fascinating avenues right there. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. And let's bring in NBC News now, legal analyst Angela Sanandela and criminal defense attorney Misty Maris. Misty, starting with you, how likely is prison time here?
It's very unlikely. So the federal guidelines say that anywhere between 15 and 21 months in prison is what is generally given with these charges. However, these charges are unique because in general, the charge of falsification of the document and possession of the gun while using illegal drugs, those aren't charged on their own. Usually it comes with something else. And that could be that somebody who is a prior felon was in possession of the gun. A prior felon tried to acquire a gun, or the gun was used in another crime. We don't have any of that here. So even though that time frame is a comparator for convictions on this statute, there's other factors that the judge can take into consideration. Another primary factor, all of this conduct is 2018. Now it's 2024. There's been no crime in between relating to gun or drug use. And so that's going to be something the judge will take into consideration. And in discretion, I think we're not likely to see any jail time.
And Angela, let's take a quick pause for a refresher from the special counsel explaining what the crime here was. Let's take a quick listen.
This case was about the illegal choices defendant made while in the throes of addiction, his choice to lie on a government form when he bought a gun, and the choice to then possess that gun. It was these choices and the combination of guns and drugs that made his conduct dangerous.
It seems like a pretty straightforward case there, and then we're hearing that the jury might have been maybe like 6-6 for some of the days, the first days of deliberations. Then we saw this conviction all of a sudden. Like, was this a complicated case? And what do you think of that whole 6-6 thing becoming a unanimous decision pretty quickly after that?
Gadi, I have to say that I was actually surprised to hear that there was this split initially, because if you go by the evidence alone, it truly seems overwhelming. I mean, we all know that when prosecutors even bring cases like this, they bring the charges, they already have a head start. You already know their chances of conviction are really high. But in this case, we not only saw his loved ones testifying about the extent of the drug use, we also saw the FBI chemist talking about how there was cocaine on the gun pouch. There was just so much evidence. I was surprised. Now, in terms of the flip quickly, well, that's what happens in deliberations. 1 or 2 or 3 people start talking and convincing their peers, and that's why we require a unanimous decision. I'm not surprised that it went from 6 to 12 in a few hours. I think I'm most surprised that there were 6 who didn't agree with the beyond a reasonable doubt to begin with, Gadi.
Fascinating. Misty, it seems like the defense really came down to, at least from what I saw, well, Hunter didn't think he was an addict when he bought the gun, or at least that was what was presented. So what could an appeal here look like? I don't know if you were able to listen to Sarah earlier, but she said that one possible avenue would be maybe a Second Amendment appeal. Do you think we could see something like that, or what kind of appeal are we talking?
Yeah, absolutely. There's several avenues, and I did hear her, and she hit the nail on the head with several of the avenues. So one relates to the Second Amendment. In 2022, there was a Supreme Court case called the Brewing case. It substantially expanded Second Amendment rights. And now there are many legal challenges around the country relating to who can possess a gun, whether or not somebody with a criminal conviction, mental health issues, prior drug use can possess a gun, and whether or not those forms are actually constitutional. It's an issue that the Supreme Court is going to take up, and something the defense actually tried to get this case delayed or thrown out based on those arguments. The trial court didn't do it, but that is a ripe appellate issue. They're also going to say, from a defense perspective, that that original plea agreement should have been enforced. There's another argument. The others, and this was mentioned, there's always going to be objections put on the record. Defense attorneys are listening because they're on a dual track. They're defending the case. They're also preserving the appellate record. One is absolutely that form that the 2021 version with a handwritten note was not allowed in. The defense wanted to say that the original form could have been manipulated. Number two, this is a big one. The defense was not allowed to bring in an expert on addiction. Now, addiction was a central part of the prosecution's case. What does it mean? The defense was not afforded the opportunity to have an expert explain that to the jury. So that's going to be another avenue for an appeal.
I mean, looking at the, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but I remember looking at that calendar and the receipts that basically showed when he was doing drugs in October. It just seems like a lot of the avenues are somewhat closed, and yet that Second Amendment avenue just, Angela, I want to get your take. I mean, do you think that a possible Second Amendment appeal could be mounted here?
I do. I actually think that's his strongest appeal, which is so unusual given how uphill any constitutional battle is. But if you look even at the breakdown of the Supreme Court and where they're leaning, it is almost shocking in this way that the conservatives are the ones who might be the ones who could appeal, who could overturn this case eventually down the road. But I also want to, Gadi, just bring up how originally Misty said that it is likely that there won't be any jail time in this case. But given this tax trial that is likely going to happen in September, I believe that this conviction will then influence his sentencing there if they do get a conviction. The evidence there is so strong. So I believe it's very likely that at some point Hunter Biden will see jail time. Maybe not for this one, but for the second case.
His legal troubles continue. Misty, Angela, thank you so much for being with us. And up until today's guilty verdict, the White House described their strategy regarding the trial as, quote, deliberately low key. So did that change after today? Let's bring in NBC's White House correspondent, Ali Rafa.
Yeah, Gadi, the reaction from the Biden team has really followed that pattern, and we expect that to continue in the wake of this verdict. The president continuing with his schedule as normal today. He delivered a major address on gun control just hours after his son was found guilty on those federal gun charges. But then the White House did announce a change, that the president, instead of going back to the White House after that event, would go to Wilmington, Delaware to be with his family. And of course, we saw those striking images on the tarmac in Wilmington as the president embraced not only his son Hunter, but his daughter-in-law and his grandson. And we know that the president reacted early this morning, just a short time after this verdict. He said in a statement, in part, quote, "I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal. Jill and I will always be there for Hunter and the rest of our family with our love and support. Nothing will ever change that." And that love and support, Gadi, was on full display throughout this trial and now in the wake of it. The president not attending in person, but we did see the First Lady remarkably shuttling between France and Wilmington, Delaware late last week and even through the weekend to be there to support her stepson throughout this trial. And we saw the emotional toll it's taken on her at times, wiping away tears in the courtroom, several times appearing to walk into the courtroom hand in hand with Hunter Biden. And we know that this entire trial has been incredibly stressful for the Biden family, as it's really resurfaced a lot of family trauma surrounding Hunter Biden's drug addiction in the wake of his brother Beau Biden's death. But the fallout is really going to be a test for the family, but especially the president, as we enter this really critical time period, this very high-stakes time period, as he prepares to go to Italy for the G7 summit in the next couple days. We also expect him to have several high-stakes fundraisers that he's taking part in. Of course, he's also preparing for the first general election debate against former President Trump at the end of the month, and the election is now just 5 months away. So all of this, Hunter Biden's sentencing expected to come soon, as well as the second trial that Hunter is facing in California for tax evasion charges. That's scheduled to begin in September. All of this challenging the president's roles, not only as president, but also as father to Hunter Biden. Gadi.
And for a little more, let's bring in NBC's chief political analyst, the one and only Chuck Todd. Chuck, thanks so much for being with us today. This is such a weird day. We're living in this day and age where we just saw a former president and the son of a current president convicted of felonies. We've been hearing over and over again from the right about the weaponization of the justice system, or lawfare, as some are calling it. Before we get into it, let's take a quick listen to what Republicans have been saying.
Okay.
Last week's verdict in New York shows how corrupt, rigged, and un-American the weaponized justice system has become under Joe Biden and Democrats.
It's impossible for anybody to deny that looks at this objectively, that the judicial system in our country has been weaponized against President Trump.
This is a justice system that hunts Republicans while protecting Democrats.
Okay, so Chuck, given what we just saw with Hunter's conviction, I mean, does this change that argument?
Well, logically it should. Look, I just want to take a step back and just acknowledge the fact that, look, you know, a lot of people look at the United States and see a lot of flaws sometimes, but what other country in the world where the current leader of said country would allow would be essentially, who had the power to stop this? Joe Biden could have prevented this from happening if he really wanted to. Right? If he really wanted to abuse his position of power, he could have, and he didn't do it. And I think we had to step back and realize it's a good day for the rule of law and for the United States sort of standing alone, or certainly standing apart as a unique country. It's hard to come up with another country where you'd see a similar circumstance this completely carried out. I'm not saying other countries haven't put politicians on trial, but as that person is in power, their son, daughter, spouse. It is a unique thing only in America, and it is sort of symbolically. I do want us to take a step back. That's a good thing, right? This is what makes us different. This is why so many countries do aspire to our style of freedom and the democracy and the rule of law. And look, I do think this pretty much should wipe away the Republican argument out there. And Gadi, in order to sort of look at it that way, imagine if Biden had been found not guilty in a Delaware court, right, with, you know, it would have supercharged this criticism. Instead, it actually takes in sort of rational America, takes the wind completely out of those sails.
Now, the media thought for so many, when they saw this headline, is like, okay, federal crime. Maybe his dad is going to give him a federal pardon as president. You said that he could have stopped this beforehand. Well, earlier this week, the president did say something about that. Let's cue that up real quick.
Let me ask you, will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
Okay, so that was before his son faced a possible sentence of 25 years in prison and was convicted. Let's game this out, if you will. Let's say Hunter does get sentenced to some hard time by some twist of events, and then Joe Biden loses. Do you think we could see a pardon before he leaves office?
You know, there's a middle ground. There's commuting a sentence. It's what George W. Bush did with Scooter Libby. So you could see that. But if you told me that that the president gave him a full pardon, you know, Bill Clinton pardoned his brother, Roger Clinton, right before he left office. You know, there's a part of that where I don't know how much of a political problem that would become on that front. But, you know, there was a part of me, I'm not going to lie, where I thought, David Muir asked the follow-up about commuting us. Will you accept any sentence that your son gets? But look, I understand in the moment that the real question is that. And again, I think, look, you know, I look at what happened in this trial and I ache for them as a family. And I'm shocked in hindsight that the Bidens chose to run for president, given everything that was happening in their family's personal. This was a tumultuous period in the lives of Hunter Biden, Hallie Biden, all of the Hunter Biden extended family, all of the Beau Biden extended family. And, you know, this is one of those uncomfortable things where you got to ask yourself, did Hunter Biden get convicted only because he was the son of a president?
Yeah, that's a remarkable question, especially considering today. You see the president, Air Force One landing, them meeting on the tarmac after his son was just convicted of a felony. And this is all on the heels of the former president being convicted of felonies as well. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign has put out a statement, quote, saying the trial has been nothing more than a distraction from the real crimes of the Biden crime family. And we're already seeing all kinds of conspiracies pop up claiming that this was some sort of like deep state ruse and that this was all done to distract. How much more rhetoric like that do you think that we're going to see as the election nears?
We'll probably see a lot, but you can't both say Joe Biden isn't all there and with it, and say he's a mastermind of this grand conspiracy, right? I do think they're running into a bit of a rhetorical trap, at least with voters perhaps that are not in either partisan camp on that front. Look, I think if either campaign is leaning on a verdict or leaning on the legal system as their political messaging, I think they're turning voters off. And so what I suspect is and here's something that I'm not sure of the answer, but it wouldn't surprise me. You know, there's some Democrats that want to say, hey, go brand Donald Trump, convicted felon Trump. Never say that they want President Biden to always say, my convicted felon opponent, Donald Trump, yada, yada, yada. I don't think Joe Biden, the individual, wants to have a debate about all that, right? I understand there's some partisan Democrats would like to have that debate, but I don't know if Joe Biden, the person, can go through this having to have an opponent, then bring up his son and all those legal problems. I suspect in a month, both campaigns will have really dialed this stuff down. We'll see. Maybe I'm being Pollyannish here, but that's my suspicion.
And yet a debate is what is coming up next.
Yes.
We'll be staying tuned to your analysis after that. Chuck Todd, thank you so much for being with us. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, we are keeping our eyes on some flash flooding over in Florida right now. NBC's Bill Cairns will be here with the forecast. Plus, an unbelievable story about a woman in Maine who got caught in quicksand, of all things. This is not a movie. It actually happened, and we're going to have all the details. And over the years, Virgin's Richard Branson has learned the art of making a splash for an anniversary, and we caught up with him in Las Vegas as he marks a big milestone for Virgin Atlantic.
Over the 40 years, other airlines, have, replicated some of the things we do. But the thing that they can't replicate is the spirit of our crew.
Hey, welcome back. We're keeping an eye on some flash flooding going on in Miami tonight. More on that in just a second. But first, here are some of the other headlines we're watching right now. Earlier today, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo got grilled on Capitol Hill over how he handled the COVID-19 pandemic. He was specifically facing accusations that he misrepresented the number of deaths reported inside of state nursing homes. Cuomo says that New York followed federal guidelines laid out by the Trump administration and the CDC. And over the weekend, Senator John Fetterman and his wife Giselle were involved in a car crash in Maryland. Officials say the senator struck the back of another car for, quote, unknown reasons. Fetterman got a bruised shoulder, but besides that, no one was hurt, and the senator will be back in D.C. for votes this week. And over in Texas, the DOJ is cracking down on the use of illegal gun conversion kits that can turn a semi-auto handgun into a machine gun. They're calling it Operation Kill Switch, since those pieces are known as switches. The operation is because of an uptick in the number of switches with the rise of 3D printers, as well as an increase in deadly switch shootings. And today, the Baltimore shipping channel is finally back open after that bridge collapse almost 3 months ago. All of this after crews removed 50,000 tons of steel and concrete from the river. Officials say they hope to rebuild that bridge by 2028. And the world's greatest eater is unfortunately not going to be eating in one of the most famous eating events this year. Joey Chestnut, 16-time champion of the Nathan's hot dog eating contest, has been banned from competing in this year's competition after he signed with another brand that sells plant-based hot dogs. Major League Eating says Chestnut is still allowed to come to the event, and they hope he returns next year. And right now, there is an extreme weather double threat hitting millions. We're talking heat and flooding. Out west, temperatures are 10 to 20 degrees above average today as tens of millions from Arizona through California are under heat alerts. And down south, up to 6 million people are under flood alerts. And today in Miami, streets there were overflowing with floodwaters rising so fast. Delays at Miami International are stacking up too. Over 500 flights there have been delayed. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns is tracking it all. Hey, Bill.
Gadi, we have a big flood set up in southern Florida, and this is tropical moisture, but not a tropical storm or not a hurricane or anything like that. This is just associated with a lot of tropical moisture through the Caribbean and this stalled out front. So this high pressure is kind of building in, a little bit of a squeeze play going on, and so it's just wringing that moisture out right over southern Florida. It started today, going to continue tomorrow, and then on and off Thursday and Friday. And even by Florida standards, with the sandy soil, eventually we're going to start getting some significant flooding. So we have flood watches up from about 7 million. This is south of I-4. Tampa and Orlando in and out of the rain, maybe some minor urban flooding, but the significant stuff is Fort Myers, the Naples, Marco Island, the Miami area, West Palm Beach up to about down to Fort Lauderdale. That's the area of greatest concern. And you notice we have been under a flash flood warning for very heavy rain and thunderstorms on and off in the metro Miami area, and that's been going on right through the heart of the rush hour. And you can see why here. So notice Tampa and Orlando, Daytona Beach, scattered storms, but down to the south here, it's just been continuous heavy rain. The yellow is steady rain. The red is where we start to talk about some really heavy rainfall. As we zoom in, these thunderstorms right here that just cleared out, that was what was responsible for the flash flood warning. But the rain is still on and off, so it's not like it gets that much breaks in between the heavy rain, so all the rainfall leaves. Heading up to the north, notice Tampa, just some light rain, but there's been persistent and very heavy rain, almost like a stalled thunderstorm near Sarasota, and that could also cause some minor problems. So additional rainfall, and this is impressive. I mean, we're talking in addition to what we've already had, another 7 inches Miami, 9 inches from Fort Myers to Naples. So that's why we could have significant flooding. I don't think so much tonight, but as we go into tomorrow. So now let's talk about the heat. It's back. What else is new in the Southwest? Mostly it's been in the desert communities from Tucson to Phoenix to Vegas, but also interior sections of California. And as we go through tomorrow, this will remain in place, and then we'll see some of these dropping as we'll begin our cool down, slow cool down, as we head towards Father's Day weekend in the West. But as we look towards tomorrow, another very hot day. Reno could have had a record high. Fresno, Palm Springs could be near record highs. And now we're starting to see it spread. So it has been pretty much confined down along the Gulf Coast, Texas, but now for the first time through the Central Rockies and also as we go through areas of the plains. And by the time we get to the end of this week, the heat really begins to shift. So we took Nashville, pair of 95s to end your week into the weekend. Atlanta going to flirt with 100 by the time we get to Saturday. And even Washington, D.C., 95 on Friday. Saturday it gets a little bit better, and then a big heat wave. And Gadi, this will be the story as we head after Father's Day weekend. This is the outlook for next week. Notice the West. Actually cooler than average. Things not bad. Even in Southern California, normal temperatures. But this big red blob that covers everywhere pretty much east of the Rockies, this signals possibly even historic heat wave from the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes into the Northeast. We could flirt with 100 degrees, Gadi, in areas of the Northeast about a week from now. That'll be something to talk about.
Absolutely. Bill Cairns, thank you. And turning now to some breaking news out of Atlanta, where a city bus has been hijacked, resulting in the death of at least one person. Atlanta police say a gunman held 16 passengers and a driver hostage, allegedly holding a gun to the driver's head. Police chased the bus down the highway where it hit all kinds of cars, and the bus eventually was stopped. Passengers ran out with their hands above their heads. One person has been found with a gunshot wound and has later died. Police say former convict 39-year-old Joseph Greer is now in custody. Also in Atlanta, 4 people were shot in some sort of rampage in the middle of a very busy food court in the middle of today. Now, this happened pretty close to the Georgia Aquarium, and witnesses are describing that chaos.
All of a sudden, out of nowhere, like an influx of people were just like sprinting out of there in all different directions. And we were like, what is going on? And somebody like screamed like, there's a shooting, there's a shooter, like run.
Police are saying an off-duty cop stopped the suspected shooter, who isn't even supposed to have a gun because he's a convicted felon. NBC News correspondent Priya Sridhar has more from Atlanta. Priya?
Yeah, Gadi, this all unfolded at 2:17 in the afternoon. As you mentioned, this is a very busy food court, and it was peak lunchtime hours where many people who work in these nearby buildings go there for lunch. So it was said that it was actually crowded at the time of the shooting. We did speak to some witnesses who said that it was very chaotic and frankly pretty scary because they didn't know exactly how many shooters were involved and how many people were actually shot. But we did attend a press conference with the mayor of Atlanta and the police chief, who were able to tell us that a 34-year-old suspect, a man, got into some sort of fight with a 47-year-old man inside of that food court. It escalated into a physical altercation, and that suspect then pulled out a handgun and opened fire, shooting the 47-year-old man and also shooting a 69 and 70-year-old woman who were said to basically be bystanders while the shooting was unfolding. Now, an off-duty Atlanta police officer who was working a second job as a security officer inside of that food court was able to open fire and apprehend the suspect, who did ultimately get shot. Let's take a listen to what the mayor of Atlanta had to say about that Atlanta police officer and what happened inside of the food court.
Moments. It was very quick. You can watch how fast that officer sprung into action. I mean, had he not been there, things could have gotten worse. So he was there within moments, within a minute. You know, this is a busy area. This is where people work, and this is where people dine while they are at work. So lunchtime crowd was there, and it was a fairly active scene where individuals were just going about their day, having lunch and eating, and this incident occurred.
Now, Gadi, another element that we're learning tonight is that 34-year-old suspect is actually a convicted felon who served time in prison for armed robbery, so he wasn't allowed to legally own a firearm. The mayor also said that he's actually been arrested 11 times. Now, some good news tonight. Those 3 victims who were shot and the suspect who was shot by an off-duty police officer were taken to 2 nearby hospitals. They're all said to be in critical condition, but they are expected to survive the shooting. Gadi?
11 arrests before this. Wow, Priya, thank you. And coming up, a story of a woman who was actually trapped in quicksand on a beach in Maine. We've got those scary details. But first, you got to see this. You're looking at an NFL stadium in Indianapolis. It was turned into 2 million gallon sized swimming pool right there. Over 1,000 athletes will be swimming their hearts out there during the trials, all in hopes of making it to Paris. And where did all that water come from? Well, apparently they pumped it in from an Indianapolis fire hydrant, and when it's all said and done, 52 Olympians will be making their way to the Paris Games. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back, and here's some of the stories that we're following out here in the West. Last night at UCLA, police arrested 25 pro-Palestinian protesters for setting up more encampments on campus. This is a month after officers broke up a weeks-long encampment that led to the arrest of hundreds, and only 4 days away from the university's commencement. Pro-Palestinian groups at UCLA are still demanding the college divestment from all Israeli business interests. And that Oregon dad who pled guilty to drugging his daughter's friends with sleeping meds at a sleepover was sentenced to 2 years in prison today. He was convicted of 3 felony counts of causing another person to ingest a controlled substance after he laced their smoothies with the drugs, and the girls were 12 at the time. And IATSE, the latest Hollywood union in negotiations, is trying to wrap up bargaining with studios by June 27th after adding an extra week of talks to the schedule. Negotiators have reached agreements on several topics like AI and subcontracting, but issues like wage increases, pensions, and health insurance have to be resolved. Hey, welcome back. More on where ceasefire negotiations stand between Israel and Hamas in just a moment. But first, let's take a quick look around the world. We're going to start in Malawi, where the country's vice president and 9 others were killed in a plane crash. Now, the plane was reportedly missing Monday morning, and the wreckage was found today near a hill. Apparently, there was some bad weather that caused poor visibility in the mountainous area where the plane was flying at the time of that crash. And the U.S. has lifted a ban on sending weapons to a controversial Ukrainian military unit known as the Azov Brigade. Now, the U.S. had banned them from using American weapons, citing the neo-Nazi ideology by some of its founders. And passengers hurt in an extremely turbulent Singapore Airlines flight last month are now being offered $10,000 in compensation. One person died and 30 people were hurt on a flight heading to Singapore from London, but was forced to land in Thailand because of all that turbulence. And animal rights activists have slapped Wallace from Wallace and Gromit on a portrait of King Charles III. The group known as Animal Rising shared this video online showing a couple of supporters glue that head onto the king's head, trying to bring attention to what Animal Rising claims is animal cruelty at a number of farms. And it looks like Hamas might have sent a response to that ceasefire proposal backed by the United Nations Security Council, but there is no deal just yet. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with the families of the American hostages, and NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell has more.
Today, 8 months into the war, hostage families demanding the return of their loved ones out front of the Secretary of State's hotel in Tel Aviv. America's top diplomat telling them,
"We're working every minute to bring everyone home."
He met privately with the families of the American hostages. I spoke exclusively with several, including the mother of Itay Shen, who's been told her son was killed, but says she won't believe it until Hamas returns his body.
We didn't have a burial. We did not bury him. We don't have a grave. We did not see the Shiva. For me, Itay is still alive.
It comes after that dramatic rescue mission, Israeli forces freeing 4 hostages, 3 of them held by Hamas in this home. Aviva Siegel, who herself was kidnapped on October 7th with her husband Keith. She was later released, but she's scared that military operation may make it harder for Keith and the other hostages still being held by Hamas.
They're going to hide them, that they're going to be nervous and take it all out on the hostages.
Late today, Hamas responded to the Israeli ceasefire offer. The White House says it's still evaluating what they said. Secretary Blinken has demanded the leader of Hamas accept the deal.
Are they looking after one guy who may be, for now, safe, buried, 10 stories underground somewhere in Gaza, while the people that he purports to represent continue to suffer in a crossfire of his own making?
It comes after the Wall Street Journal obtained messages from that Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar, saying he believes more Palestinian deaths work to his advantage, calling civilian deaths necessary sacrifices. Tonight, the White House's John Kirby.
It should surprise and shock no one that a beast like Mr. Sinwar would actually take glee in it.
And tomorrow, the Secretary's final Middle East stop in Qatar, the key negotiator with Hamas, to assess next steps.
Andrea Mitchell, thank you. In China, 4 American college professors were attacked in a shocking daytime stabbing. The suspect is now in custody, and NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Freyer reports from Beijing with the latest developments.
4 American teachers are recovering after a stabbing attack in broad daylight at a park here in China. This shocking cell phone video taken moments after it happened. In it, 3 people are down and appear to be bleeding. Voices around them saying foreigners are injured. It happened in Jilin, about 600 miles from Beijing. The teachers are from Cornell College in Iowa, visiting a partner university in the city. Cornell College President Jonathan Brand says, "We have been in contact with all 4 instructors and are assisting them during this time. There were no students taking part in this program." Michael Meyer used to teach in Jilin.
But it's exceedingly rare for foreigners, let alone 4 university teachers, to be attacked like this in China.
So far, there's no official word on motive for the attack. The State Department says they're monitoring the situation. One Iowa congresswoman has been in touch with Cornell College.
There were a lot of people around. People were shocked, and they felt it was not typical what you would see in China.
Iowa State Representative Adam Zapner confirmed his brother, David Zapner, is one of the victims. He says his brother was stabbed in the arm, but is doing well and is in good spirits. At a regular briefing here, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs told NBC News that the stabbing is, quote, an isolated incident, adding that China is a safe place. The attack comes at a tense time for U.S.-China relations here, with both sides trying to revive student and teacher exchanges. China's leader, Xi Jinping, announced plans to bring 50,000 young Americans to study here. Right now, there are only around 700. Most images and videos of the attack have been tightly controlled or outright censored on Chinese social media. Police now say a 55-year-old man was arrested at the park. They took a full day to confirm this, and also that a Chinese national was stabbed when they tried to intervene. The injured Americans, meanwhile, are said to be not in life-threatening condition, and there is no information yet on when they might be heading home. Janice Mackey-Freyer, NBC News, Beijing.
I'm praying for their full recovery. Janice, thank you. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. And to get some hints about the Big Bang and the creation of our universe, we have to look really, really closely at these super teeny tiny particles in good old South Dakota, of all places. That fascinating research is coming up next, so stay tuned. And tonight in the future of everything, we are zooming in on teeny tiny particles that could explain the beginning of time. But first, here's some of the headlines in the future of space exploration. The University of Florida is one of 10 universities that will work with NASA on its mission to launch an artificial star. Yeah, you heard that right. With the help of university research teams and mission control based at George Mason University, the land-old space mission will try to place an artificial star into Earth's orbit using a satellite with some lasers. For the first time ever, frost has been detected on Mars, and it was found on these huge volcanoes, these ancient volcanoes that are the largest mountains in our solar system. And it was pretty unexpected because of how close that frost is to the equator. That totally challenges what we thought we knew about the red planet's climate, but it might just be the key to finding life outside of Earth. And now to some particle physics. Forget deep space telescopes. How about deep underground bunkers? But first, when it comes to understanding the origins of the universe, the answer might be these teeny tiny particles that are 10 billion times smaller than a grain of sand. Of course, we are talking about neutrinos, those little invisible messengers born at the heart of stars like our sun that are constantly zipping through space, and they could help answer why the Big Bang went bang, if you will. So here's the problem. Neutrinos are incredibly difficult to catch. Think tiny little golden snitches that are tinier and way lighter than an atom, and that's why scientists are building this massive underground experiment in South Dakota, of all places. And we want you to imagine this giant net a mile beneath the Earth's surface that will try to capture neutrinos as they travel through our planet. And once it's done, the Department of Energy's Dune project will be one of the most powerful detectors ever built. So joining us now is Sojanya Golapny, a senior scientist at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so neutrinos are so small. I know we actually didn't discover them until the 1970s, right? If they're basically invisible, how do we study them?
It's a very good question. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm, of course, happy and excited to talk about my favorite topic, neutrinos, all the time. So this beautiful image you have, gives you an insight as to how we detect them. So neutrinos don't have charge. So charge is great because with charged particles, they make visible tracks. But in this picture, the neutrino is coming from the left. And then you can sort of see like a V shape. So at the center of that is where the neutrino has come in and interacted with the proton. The image here is the bubble chamber image. And when neutrino interacts with proton, it creates a mess. And we love that mess because, it's through that mess we try to learn about the incoming neutrino. So in this image, you can see the track that's kind of proceeding at the center is we call the muon track, and that's very long. And then there's two shorter tracks coming off, and that one is a proton and one is a pion. So we don't detect neutrinos directly, but indirectly, we tend to learn about them.
Yeah, and again, this is the 1970s. That's the tech that we were using back there to detect them. Now we are building something so deep underground. Can you tell us about this new neutrino trap? I mean, how deep underground are we talking here? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, it's a mile underground, actually. So, and this detector will be built in South Dakota at the SURF Lab, which stands for Sanford Underground Research Facility. And the detectors we're building are not small. As you already mentioned, these are the biggest liquid argon detectors ever to be built. Imagine, each detector size of a football stadium, and we're trying to build 4 of them deep underground. So it's a huge project, very challenging and adventurous at the same time. And there's a lot we can learn about neutrinos.
Yeah, it's so wild to think of. I mean, this is something you're trying to detect, these things that are flying through all of us, flying through everything that we see around us. But I got to ask, what kinds of secrets do you think that we could unlock here? What could we learn about the universe with these neutrinos?
Yeah, so there's many pressing questions about the universe. Some of them most people would have heard. One is, if you go back to Big Bang, and then, according to Big Bang, there's equal amounts of matter and antimatter produced. And they're kind of equal and opposite entities. So you expect that they would annihilate, and then there would just be light. The fact that we are here today is because something during the formation and the evolution of the universe, that cancellation didn't happen. And thankfully, that didn't happen, that we exist. And, we have tried to understand what is it in the process of the universe that, what impacted that cancellation, as in, why did teeny bit of matter survived compared to antimatter? So we are trying to understand that question. And, we have looked at several places to answer this question. And the only place we haven't looked at is neutrinos. And that's the secret, the particle physicists as a global community are trying to answer, especially with the Dune experiment. Yeah.
To think big, you gotta look very, very small. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And finally, from the man who painted the skies red, tonight, Sir Richard Branson is in Las Vegas with a new reason to celebrate. His Virgin Atlantic Airlines is about to turn 40, and new flights were just announced linking Manchester directly to Sin City. He sat down with us to talk about Virgin's future, but not before a little Elvis surprise at a chapel off the Strip. At the Little White Chapel in Vegas, for these two flight crew lovebirds who met in the early days of Virgin Atlantic.
We flew to New York together, and the rest is history.
What better way to celebrate 40 years together than a renewal of vows by the king of throwing parties himself? Sir Richard Elvis Branson, it looks like.
That was fun. No, we're here celebrating 40 years of flying Virgin Atlantic. This lovely couple have been flying with us for 40 years. What a wonderful way of coming and surprising them and seeing them renew their vows.
And this year, Love at First Flight is Virgin Atlantic's celebratory song, marking 40 years as an upstart airline company that began when Branson got stranded by a flight cancellation way back in the 80s. You're stuck in Puerto Rico. You're trying to get to the Virgin Islands. What happened, and how did you end up selling tickets?
I said to the other passengers, just look, don't all go to hotels right away. Just wait a second. Let me see what I can do. I did have a credit card on me. And I said, do you have any planes that I could rent? Hired the plane, borrowed a blackboard, and as a joke, I wrote Virgin Airlines one way to the British Virgin Islands, $39. Went out to all the people who got bumped and filled up my first plane. And people loved it because it was a different kind of airline than the rather boring, big conventional airlines of the time.
From then on, Branson went all in on aviation, offering a radical alternative to the expensive and stuffy air travel of yesterday, as only a record mogul could, offering bars on planes, creating an upper class on the top deck of jumbo jets, massages in the air, and connecting the UK with some of the world's most swinginest destinations. Along the way, sparking a long-time rivalry with British Airways. Is BA still your nemesis?
Yeah. I mean, they went to extraordinary lengths to put us out of business.
You remember the court case. So many of us remember the blimp.
After the court case, they were having problems getting a big wheel opposite the House of Commons put up. I happened to have an airship company, so I scrambled our blimp. We flew over the limp wheel on the ground. All we said across the blimp was, BA can't get it up.
You pioneered a party in the sky, and yet fast forward 40 years later, we now see some of the competition playing by your playbook, the one that you wrote. How do you stay ahead?
We're still smaller. We can still innovate all the time. I mean, I was working out this morning and suddenly thought, you know, in our lounges, we should have a workout room. And then I thought, we've got a roof on top of our lounge at Heathrow. So
Wait, hold on. You're breaking news here. So you're saying this morning you were working out.
Yeah.
And then this morning you were like, hey, wait, people should be working out at the airport if they want to.
Yeah. Screw it. Let's do it. Go for it.
While his love of adventure has spun off into out-of-this-world endeavors like Virgin Galactic.
If we can do this, just imagine what you can do.
Branson hopes the Virgin legacy involves his 2 children.
Holly went off and became a doctor, but I managed to wrench her in to help her dad. Sam went off to be a musician, but I managed to wrench him in to help as well. The key to, you know, to running a good company is how good you are with people, and they both are fantastic at that.
As for the airlines, it was born around the same time as his kids. He now describes it like a doting father of sorts.
She was bullied as a child by British Airways. Like any child that gets bullied, you fight to protect them. She's been through everything since. Incredibly proud that she's now a 40-year-old virgin. My daughter is also 40 years old. Fortunately, I can't call her the same name because I got 3 lovely grandchildren.
Oh, my gosh. So Richard Branson as a girl dad? How about that? That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.